Hey BookTube, it's Mickey, and I'm here today to talk about my 2017 reading goals. And before I get into that, I wanted to just give you guys a couple of statistics about how my reading went last year. And so you guys can kind of have an idea about why I might have set some of the goals that I set for this year. So I'm just going to jump right into that. One of the goals that I had last year was to keep better track of my reading and to maintain a spreadsheet, and I was able to do that. I did a very good job of recording all of the books that I read on a spreadsheet, and so claps for me for that. I read 45 books last year. My Goodreads goal was 52, which I would have reached if I hadn't had a horrible reading slump between the months of October and December. I read 14,107 pages, and this is counting the pages from books that I DNF. Because if I read 200 pages of a 500-page book and then I DNF it, I want to give myself credit for reading those 200 pages because they took up some of my time, and so I feel like I deserve to have credit for that. My most read genre was literary fiction, or fiction slash literary fiction. 37% of the books that I read last year fit in that genre. My second most read genre was a tie between graphic novels and mystery thrillers. Each of them took up 14% of my reading. The average page length of the books that I read last year was between 100 and 400 pages, so I didn't read too many big chunky books last year. Most of the books that I read were published this decade between 2010 and 2016. 51% of the books that I read were published during that time, and I read three new releases last year. Majority of the books I read were by women, so I read 70% of my books were by women, and 28% of my books were by males, and none of my books were by people who are either trans or non-binary. Um, the majority of my books were written by Black Americans at 33%, or white Americans at 30%. And I only read seven books by authors outside of the US or the UK. Um, so that was something I was a tiny bit disappointed in. The average star rating for the books that I read was 3.84. I gave 18 books 4 stars last year and 6 books 5 stars. So I think that that's pretty good, um, considering how many books I read through the during the year. I started one series, which was Sex Criminals, which is a graphic novel series, and I finished two series. I finished the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante, which I've talked about several times, and then I also finished. Technically, I call it finishing the Harry Potter series because I read Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and it is a continuation. Even though it's a different form, it is technically a continuation of that series and of that story. So I count it, even though a lot of people wish that it never existed and don't count it. I count it. And My best reading month last year was August. I read 10 books in the month of August, which is not normal for me, and I actually suspect that a whole lot of those books were graphic novels, so I think that's probably why the number is that high. I usually read about 4 books a month on average. And then my TBR grew last year by 68 books. That's a lot of books, and those are kind of like a nice like end of year wrap up list of statistics. So some of my goals for this year, the first goal is to deal with that TBR, just like everybody else. Last year, of the 45 books that I read, only 16 of those books came from my bookshelf. All the rest of those books were library books. Now, that's a lot better than it was in 2015, where I only read 5 books from my shelf, and all the rest of the books were from the library. But still, that is a really small number considering how many unread books I own. So I decided I really need to be kind of realistic with myself about my reading habits. I tend to read mostly from the library, mainly because library books have due dates. And so due dates kind of inspire me to get on the ball and complete these books, as opposed to books that are on my shelf where I get to pick them up whenever I kind of feel like it. And so I decided I need to do one or two things. I either need to stop going to the library often and really reduce how often I stop checking. Basically, I need to stop checking books out of the library, or I need to get rid of a lot of these unread books that I own. Since if I'm going to be consistently using the library, what is the point of me keeping these books? It's kind of like I'm just kind of hoarding them at this point. And so what I'm trying to do is something that'll allow me to meet myself in the middle in this regard, because I don't want to stop going to the library, because I really enjoy the library. It's one of my favorite places. And also going to the library will fit in with a couple of other goals that I really want to do for the year. So I don't want to cut off the library completely, but I am going to reduce how often I go and reduce the number of books that I normally check out when I do go to the library. I'm also going to make it so now that whenever I complete a library book, I have to complete a book that I own before I can start another book from the library. So even if that library book becomes due, I'm just going to have to become comfortable with returning books unread, because I just really want to have a nice balance. If I'm setting my Goodreads goal again for 52 books. So if I do that, I should have 26 books read off my shelf and 26 library books. So half and half is better than what it was last year. And so I want to try and do that for this year. So every library book that I read, I have to read a book off my shelf. I'm also, though, going to purge my shelves this year. I'm going to go through each shelf and sort of sort out the books and decide which ones I should keep and which ones I can probably give away. Especially, again, considering the fact that if I give it away, it doesn't mean that it won't get read, because I use my library often. It just means that I won't own it. And I'm going to try and do that on camera is the goal. I'm kind of been inspired. One of the things that I did when I was in the midst of my reading slump last year was I watched a whole lot of makeup videos. I became like obsessed with makeup again. If you follow me on like Instagram or Twitter, you might have seen me talking about that. And so one of my favorite types of videos to watch from that is the makeup declutter video. And basically what a makeup declutter video is, people put out the makeup that they own, and then they go through it and try and get rid of things that they haven't used in a long time, or things that are old and expired, or things that they just know they don't like and they're never going to touch. And so I'm going to do the same thing for my bookshelves and try and do it on my channel. So I'm going to go shelf by shelf, show you the books that are on the shelf, and then make some hard decisions about which ones I'm going to keep and which ones I'm going to give away, so that I can make space on my shelf for new books, because my shelves are overflowing. Like there's books stacked here. My other shelf over in the other side of my room is like double stacked. I can't even see what's behind. Like it's a mess. And so I really do need to reduce my TBR this year. So that is one of the things that I'm going to try and do. And hopefully I'll be able to film it. It'd be kind of like a weird unofficial bookshelf tour, sort of, because you'll get to see the books on my shelves, but at the same time, hopefully those shelves will be becoming a lot smaller, I guess. So we'll see how that goes. I'm also going to buy fewer books this year. I usually only get my books during the library book sale, but I go kind of crazy at the library book sale. There's usually 3 a year. I usually only go to 2 of them, and I usually get like 20 to 30 books from each of the sales. This year I'm reducing it down. I'm only allowed to get at max 10 books from the library sale, and then any books bought in between the library sale, I'm pretty much not allowing myself to buy anything unless it is very rare or it's a book that I've read before. So we'll see how that goes. I don't think I'm gonna have an issue with that, because I don't have a huge issue with spending. I have a huge issue with the library because it's free. And so that's why I have a huge tendency to kind of hoard and gather library books, because I don't have to pay for them. So I'm going to try and do less of that. Next thing that I would like to do is I would like to read. I want to participate in the book Riot Read Harder Challenge. I've done it each of the past few years. I've never completed it. And And I'm not even that concerned about the idea of completing them. I just really like a lot of the challenges, and I really like trying to find books that fulfill them. So I'm just going to do that for this year. And I'm going to do it in a kind of sort of game sort of way. So what I did is in this BoxyCharm box, because I don't have a mason jar right now, I have a bunch of slips of paper that have a lot of the different challenges written on here. And every month I will pull two from this box and try and pick books that fit those two challenges. So I pulled two earlier this month, and the two that I pulled was a book about war and a book set 5,000 miles from where you live. And so the book about war that I picked was Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut, which I actually just finished. And so I'll be talking about that one really soon. And then for the book set of 5,000 miles from where you are from, I picked Midnight Children by Salman Rushdie. So yeah, those are, and I'm going to kind of sort of do that for the rest of the year, and probably I'll be doing that on camera. So yeah, that's my second goal, is to do the Read Harder Book Riot Read Harder challenge. I also want to increase the number of books that I read by non-American, non-US authors. I just do not read that often outside of those regions, and I really want to do so. So if you guys have some recommendations that you would below, please leave them in the comments. I also would like to read more books by authors who, well, actually at this point it's not even, I feel like I would prefer to read more books by authors who identify as trans or who are non-binary in gender. But at this point, I will even settle for reading more books about these, about people who are trans or non-binary, because I just don't have hardly any of that at all in my collection and in my TBRs, even on Goodreads and so on and so forth. I kind of have absolutely no idea really where to start. Like, I know some of the big books like Redefining Realness by Janet Mock, and then there's Stone Butch Blues by, I can't remember the name of the author, I think it's Leslie Feinberg. I might be wrong about that, I'll correct it if I am. And I would prefer but I don't really know anybody else really. So if you guys know of authors or know of books that you would recommend, please leave those down below. I also would like to read more new releases. I really like, one of the things that I did in 2015 that I didn't do in 2016 was I read a lot of new releases. And I kind of really like being aware of what's going on in the world of publishing currently. Just kind of having an idea of like what authors are hot right now, what books are on everybody's tongue, just out of, I don't know, I like being able to be a part of that conversation. So I would like to read more new releases, which is part of the reason why I'm not putting myself on a library ban, because I'm probably going to be checking out a lot of these new releases instead of reading them, instead of buying them. But I also want my new, try and focus on, for my new releases, I want to try and focus on not just the really like super hyped up new releases, but some of the smaller ones that kind of go unrecognized. So for instance, like Counter Narratives, which I read it in 2016, but it came out in 2015. Like, that's a relatively new book that kind of went under the radar. And so I'd like to try and find those books that are kind of doing that, the ones that are coming out, but they're not necessarily getting all of the hype that some of these other new releases are doing. So kind of maybe have a mix of the two, some really popular ones and some more like, not obscure, I'm not trying to know what word I'm looking for, just ones that are not being talked about as much. So that would be something that I want to do. And I also, of course, I want to try and become more consistent with my booktube channel. And one way that I'm determining to be able to do that is by keeping notes when I read, like keeping really detailed notes when I read. Because what tends to happen for me is I'll read a book and then I won't have time to film a review for that book until maybe a couple of weeks after I finished it, just because how my schedule is sometimes. And I have a really, really bad memory. Like, I really do. And after a few weeks, I no longer trust myself sometimes, especially if the book didn't leave a huge impression on me. I don't always trust myself to talk about the book. Or if the book did leave a really huge impression on me, sometimes I feel intimidated because I really want to do a good job of reviewing it. And I hate the idea that I might be reviewing it while not remembering like key facts or thoughts or ideas about it. So I want to get better at taking notes as I read so that I have some detailed ideas and things written down that I can refer to so that I can kind of script my reviews even if it is several weeks out from reading the book. So that's one thing that I'm doing to try and help myself be more consistent. And I'm just going to like try and commit to like one video a week. Or maybe not even just like one video a week, like filming one day a week. And because usually I can knock out like one or two videos in a day if I have the time. So, but yeah, like filming one day a week. I just kind of want to try and dedicate myself to that so that I can stay consistent with updating my channel. But I also want to be forgiving of myself when I can't, because sometimes I can't. It really, sometimes life really does get in the way. And then my last challenges, they're things I am definitely committed to. I'm going to put a link to it. There's a Goodreads group called Pick a Shelf, and they have a lot of little games and things that they do to help people to cut down on their TBR, and I'm going to be participating in that. What I kind of like about it is that it's really flexible. Like, I don't have to pick my books now and say like, here are the 10 books that I'm going to read for the year, because I fail at that. I love making those lists. I love making a list and saying these are the books that I'm going to read this year. I never follow them ever, 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 ever. It's like always my downfall. Like, one of my goals I didn't reach last year was I had this set list of 18 books off my shelf called my Read My Own Damn Books bookshelf, and I read like 4 or 5 books off of that list of 18, but I still read 16 books off my TBR, just not the books that I said I was going to read. So one of my goals is actually to not make lists, to try and make fewer lists, because I tend to make a lot of lists like, this is what I'm going to read, and then I like don't do it, and then I feel like a failure. So I'm trying to find ways. So I want to have a little bit of structure, which is what I think the book Riot reading challenge will do. So here are like goals and challenges that I want to reach, but I also want to give myself flexibility. So like, if I decide I want to, like, let's say someone I'm friends with on BookTube is like, let's do a buddy read. Like, I want to give myself like the flexibility to be like, yeah, let's do it, instead of being like, no, I have like 4 other books scheduled, so I can't do this buddy read with you until like May or something like that. Like, I hate when I do that, because then it usually means that those things don't happen. So I'm trying to like allow a lot of flexibility into my reading schedule, so that like when different read-alongs or readathons or just when my mood changes, I can kind of go with the flow and not feel like I'm not accomplishing something. And so not having too many challenges and not having lists and actually using the library less also will help me to do that. So I just want to enjoy reading as much as possible, and I'd like to read more. I really want to reach that 52 books goal or exceed it. I would love that. But yeah, that's kind of a rambly video. But yeah, those are all of my goals. Do you guys have goals for 2016? 2017. What are they? How did you guys do on your goals in 2017? And I can't get my ears right. How did you guys do on your goals in 2016? And again, any recommendations you guys have for some of the goals that I want to reach, let me know down below. If you're doing the book Riot Read Harder Challenge, also let me know down below, because maybe we could situate some buddy reads or things to help fulfill those challenges. And yeah, that's pretty much what I got. So I'll talk to you guys later. This video is super long. Bye.